Fantajī Zōn is a surreal arcade game released by Sega in 1986. It was later ported to a wide variety of consoles, including the Sega Master System. The player controls a sentient spaceship named OPA, who fights nonsensical invader enemies in the titular group of planets, full of settings atypical of the traditional scrolling shooter and pastel colors. OPA is sometimes referred to as Sega's first mascot character. The game design and main character had many similarities to the earlier Twin B, and together the games are credited with the creation of the cute em-up subgenre. Plot: in the space year 1422, the Fantajī Zōn was cast in panic at the collapse of the interplanetary monetary system. The Space Guild brings to light the plans of the planet Menon, whose forces are stealing the other planets' currencies to fund a huge fortress in the Fantajī Zōn. OPA is sent to stop the invading army and discover who is behind it. In the end, it turns out that the leader was none other than OPA's long-lost father, a revelation that leaves OPA with mixed emotions. Gameplay: in the game, the player's ship is placed in a level with a number of bases to destroy. When all the bases are gone, the stage boss appears, who must be defeated in order to move on to the next stage. There are 8 stages, and in all of them, except the final one, the scroll is not fixed. The player can move either left or right, though the stage loops. The final level consists of fighting again all previous bosses in succession and then facing the final one. OPA uses 2 different attacks: the standard weapon and bombs. He can also move down to land on the ground by sprouting feet and walking around until he flies again. It is possible to upgrade OPA's weapons, bombs and flying engine to increase speed, as well as get extra lives. Before that, the player must get money by defeating enemies, bases or bosses, and access a shop by touching a marked balloon. Each time a new item is bought, they become more expensive. When the player chooses to exit or the time runs up, another screen appears, in which he or she can select what upgrades OPA can use. Only one engine, weapon and bomb can be equipped at a time. Some of the new weapons have a time limit that starts as soon as the shop is left. Some of the bombs can be used at any moment, but they are limited. On the other hand, the engines are permanent, though some of these actually makes OPA hard to control, as he moves too fast. The power-ups can also be reassigned by re-entering the shop or touch a balloon with the word "Select" written on it. If the player loses a life, all of the upgrades are lost. Ports: Fantajī Zōn was originally an arcade game. It was later ported to the Sega Mark III Master System. The game eventually saw ports in other consoles and home computers, such as the MSX, Famicom, NES, SharpX 68000 and PC Engine, TurboGrafx-16. While all of these ports play similarly to the original version, some of them have several omissions and changes. For instance, the Master System version lacks some features such as the radar that indicates the location of the bases or a gauge that indicates how much energy they have left, and 2 of the bosses were replaced by original ones. Other versions have several changes as well. There are actually 2 different versions for the Famicom, NES. The Famicom version is ported by Sunsoft, while the NES one is an unlicensed version by Tengen. The USA version was developed by Pixel. Fantajī Zōn was later remade for the PlayStation 2, under the Sega Ages label. Although similar in appearance to the arcade version, this version used polygons instead of sprites and added some levels, including bonus levels in which the game takes the view behind OPA as he tries to collect coins from any boss that was defeated at the moment. The game mode is very similar to Space Harrier, or the unreleased Space Fantajī Zōn. Also, even though 2UP can be seen in the score display, this version only has a single-player mode. This version was released in North America along other remade classic Sega titles in the compilation Sega Classics Collection. Fantasy Zone was released for mobile phone version in 3 parts in 2002 in Japan and August 2003 in United States. On March 11, 2008, the Master System version saw a re-release in Japan for the Virtual Console. In Europe and Australia, it was released on April 11, 2008, and in North America, on April 14, 2008. In all territories, it was released at a price of 500 Wii points. On September 18 of the same year, Sega released another Sega Ages disc devoted to the series, titled Fantajī Zōn Complete Collection, making the final release in the Ages series. This time, instead of a 3D remake, the disc compiled all of the games in the series, including spin-offs, and all of Sega's own ports. It also included a remake of Fantajī Zōn 2 created for System 16 hardware. The original arcade release is also included in Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection, which is an unlockable game. The 3D port of the game was released on March 19, 2014 for the Nintendo 3DS titled 3D Fantasy Zone. OPA Brothers. New features of the 3DS port involve stereoscopic 3D visuals, adjustable difficulty settings, an ability to save the game, the ability to switch to the Japanese versions and the US versions of the game, a stage select feature and a new mode which involves the player playing as OPA's brother. In addition, satisfying certain conditions during the game enables the player to confront the 2 replacement bosses from the Master System release, each entering the boss fight by literally replacing the standard boss. Sequels: Fantasy Zone 2, The Tears of OPA, Galactic Protector, Space Fantasy Zone, Fantasy Zone Gear, The Adventures of OPA Jr., Super Fantasy Zone, Medal de Fantasy Zone, Fantasy Zone Remix. Reception: Fantasy Zone proved to be very successful in Japanese arcades, helping to give rise to the popular System 16 arcade board. It was largely ignored by the gaming media, as were most arcade games at the time. The game was reviewed in 1988 in Dragon No. 136 by Hartley, Patricia, and Kirk Lesser in The Role of Computers column. The reviewers gave the game 4 out of 5 stars. Other media, comics and manga. A manga based on the video game Fantasy Zone titled Fantasy Zone Isei Kara no Shinyakusha was released on October 1987 and it is part of the Futaba Bunko Famicom Boken Gamebook series. Television Zillion. High School. Seha Girls. Trivia. One of the songs from this game is used as a Takeshi's Castle BGM. OPA is featured as a stat-boosting robot called a Mag in Phantasy Star Online. OPA is featured as a toy capsule in Shenmue.